Record. Cool. We can do an audio clap again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ground Floor Podcast. I'm here today with Adriaanse. Beer, how are you doing?
I'm very well, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for doing this.
I'm glad we could hook it up so quickly.
Yeah, this is the fastest one I've ever arranged. Literally, with other people, it's like, okay, let's schedule it. We'll do it next week.
Yes.
We'll do it whatever. And I mean, with some people, it's like weeks in advance. So, for example, Reinhard Dechu is on Binnenlanders. Chatted with him. We set it up and then we scheduled, but then someone on set of Binnenlanders got COVID.
Oh, shit,
and he was like, shit, self-isolating. It was supposed to be yesterday. So he said, let's just postpone it to next year. And I mean, next year feels far away, but really...
and the second wave is probably going to push it out a bit further.
Exactly. So yeah, and then, I'm probably only going to talk to him in January. So with you, it was literally, hey, do you want to do a podcast? Yeah, can we do it tomorrow? Okay.
You had like the perfect timing because we had, I was supposed to have 1 million deadlines this week, but then they let us know because of COVID, the thing that we're shooting in Feb has now moved to August, and we were supposed to finish the writing. So I'm like, you got me at the right moment where I was like, yes, I can just breathe and maybe go do this podcast and chill a bit.
So what is the deadline that you're working on right now? Because you mentioned it to me on Saturday.
Yeah, so those are actually two. The one that I spoke to you about was a movie that I'm directing in January, which is part of this, they have this 50-minute movie thing going on where they're making like 64 movies of 50 minutes each with very low budgets, limited locations. So I'm writing and directing that one with a bunch of cool people. So that one I managed to hand in. But the other one that was supposed to be this week is Hotel. We're doing a 5th season of the show that we're doing, Hotel. Yeah, I don't know if
awesome.
You know it. Yeah.
I do.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. When I was in high school, I used to watch it when I started DSTV.
Oh, nice.
I used to watch. I mean, I watched them as they came out. I was ready, like no PVR.
Yeah.
I was ready to watch it.
Awesome.
And it was awesome. That was also the first time I really got sort of exposed to Skalk Besaidnout as well. And he's obviously so talented as a comedian. I saw him in Hotel, I think the first 2 seasons or so, and then shortly afterwards I was at Afrikaans is Groot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I went there, and there's this restaurant across from Times Square called Old Town Italy, where I love to go and sort of eat with my family before we go see the show. So I went there, and we're sitting, and in walk every celebrity, all of them, just as a group. They decided to come have lunch, and Skalk was amongst them. So I mean, obviously a lot of them were taking part in the show, and some of them were just there as friends, as support or whatever. So I'm sitting having lunch. I stand up to go to the bathroom. So I'm on my way to the bathroom. Here comes Skalk Besaidnout walking past me. So I think, shit, I gotta say something, but it's like a weird situation because you don't know like the mental state of the other person. So I sort of said to Skalk, I just sort of went, Skalk. And he goes, yeah? And I go, I love everything you do. And he looks at me and he goes, everything. And I said, everything. And he says, even the walk that I just did on the way here, which is just so typical of the guy. And I went, I thought it was very well choreographed. And he laughed. And I thought, bucket list, made Skalk Besaidnout laugh.
Yeah, no, that's a tick.
Exactly.
I still struggle. It's been 6 years of working together. I'm like, gotta get him to laugh at one of my jokes.
Is it? Well, I'm sure he laughs at the jokes that you write at least.
Hopefully, but he usually makes it better even. So,
is it?
Yeah, he's very good with bettering, like finding the kernel of the joke and then really, what do you call it, like mining for even more comedy with it. Yeah.
I see. So, I mean, as a writer, when you are writing, obviously, when you're writing for someone who you haven't yet worked with, it's very different. But I mean, now writing season 5, for example, or even season 3 or 4, the people that you're working with very well. So how has your writing changed over time as you've really gotten to know these people and fleshed out the characters?
So it's really an amazing thing to have the voice of the character already in your head because you know them by now. So you know which jokes even to say give to Skalky or Mila or Simone or for my character. And I think what has changed is we've realized that, not realized, but we've challenged ourselves that get the most amount of humor out of the least amount of words. So we really try to compress things, and we do a lot of drafts of our episodes, which is also, I was used to it, but when you're a younger writer, you think your first draft, first draft is always a fuck up, but you think like at least your second draft is a masterpiece. And with Hotel, we just do drafts and drafts and drafts, and then we all get together with the actors and do punchline pumping to even get it more, like what line can be even better said, or what joke can land in a bit later or whatever. So I think it's become a little bit more meticulous. Where I was a gut writer, and something like Hotel has taught me that structure is very important, and also like almost they call it, there's a berserker approach, where you jump from the wall with your battle axe and you just cleave away at your enemy. Then you get the snipers. And I was always a berserker, and now I'm like a halfway between the two, where sometimes I need to plan out a bit and then execute the scene.
I see. Okay, so I also want to ask, because I was doing some research last night. I had a very short window of time.
I don't even want to know what Google has to say about.
No, if you type in your name, you got to start at the Wikipedia page, and then you.
Is there a Wikipedia page?
There's a Wikipedia page,
but probably not in English, right?
No, Afrikaans.
Yeah,
I can read Afrikaans. So
great.
So I mean, it's. I checked the Wikipedia page, I was checking the films you work on, and they all sort of make sense. And then you've got this horror film called Parable with Jane DeVette that you did. Tell me a little bit about that.
So Parable was awesome. I was working on Hotel with, so the production company that makes Hotel were also the first producers that I worked with when I did my first series as a writer-director. So we're friends by now. And they were sitting behind the scenes, and I had one of the scenes was off. I didn't have to do anything, and they were compiling this document of a pitch document that they had to pitch to Showmax, and they were looking for a horror. And I was like, guys, I'm the horror guy. I love horrors. Like, no, Marfo, tell us, do you have a concept? I'm like, give me one day. And then the next day I phoned Zandri, my producer, and I told her, okay, this is my idea, and we ended up getting a commission. It was also like, we call it made for streaming, because it's lower budgets than you would usually have. But I mean, with everything economically going on, the budgets are low anyway. But so we had nice parameters, like we had 12 days to shoot it. Me and my brother wrote it, or he wrote it, I rewrote some, and he rewrote. First time we were working together, that was amazing to work with my brother, because he's also a horror fan. Yeah, and then we had 12 days to shoot it. We got Jane on and all the other amazing actors, Carla and Danny. And it's cool. We won a prize recently from a New Orleans horror film festival. And I was like, yeah. And then a week later, somebody informed us that a pirated copy of our movie that they have rebranded, called The Demonium, is doing the rounds between American distributing companies they edited our names out of it. So out of the credits and out of the pre-credits, they've taken our names out and put their own names on, and are now trying to sell it probably on the cheap, because it's a made-for-streaming film. But I was like, at first I was like, this is horrible, but then I realized it's actually a bit of a tap on the head. Like, somebody thinks your movie is worth pirating and trying to sell. So I was like, cool.
Yeah. No, congratulations on that.
Yeah, I took it. That's probably better than winning a prize at some horror festivals, like some Mexican cartel is, because I think it was Mexicans, because the names were all like Angel Suarez and
yes.
Yeah. So I was like, except if that's part of their ploy, to kind of make it
seem like it's Mexican.
Exactly.
And it's actually just a bunch of Canadians trying to pirate a movie.
The Canadian mob.
Yes, but I can already imagine, because I don't know, I've traveled in the US, but I've never really paid any attention, because in South Africa, if you've got a pirated movie, you've got the guys on the street,
exactly,
and those really thin, and they sort of just, I wonder what that looks like in the US, because they don't have as many people on the street.
Yeah, so this guy sent it to us. It's a whole proposal. It's like a 5-page proposal with the stills from the movie, but with all their branding and names and everything. So I guess that's how you contact the distributor and you tell them, I've got this movie, we own sole rights to it, so let's get it into some of the what do you call territories. It's set to like the Asian market or whatever. But now you reminded me now when I was standard 9 or grade 11, my father worked in Nigeria for 3 years and we went over to visit him. And there were these markets where you go to the market and they've got a whole menu on the wall of movies. And you say, I want Vanilla Sky and that. And then they just burn it there for you and give it to you. And they print a little, like those thin little things and give it to you. I was like, I thought that was normal.
At the time. Okay. I have a bit of a weird, the way that I first knew who Jane DeVette was, and she sort of popped up on my radar, is in my second year at university, which was it was last year, so 2019. I was trying to expand my business from just the University of Pretoria to a couple other universities. So I contacted my mate who was studying at Stellenbosch at the time, and I said to him, listen, he obviously already knew all about the company. I said, go, here's all the info you need. See if you can recruit some people there in Stellenbosch to work for us. So he sent out all the messages and on the message boards and sort of got everyone notified. And we get an application from this random girl to come work for our company. And we don't know, there's no name, it's just a cell phone number. So we click, open the number, and the profile picture is Jane DeVette. Okay? So
But by this point, you don't know who Jane is.
I don't know who Jane is. Okay?
You've never seen her.
She just looks vaguely familiar.
Okay.
Very vaguely. So my mate sort of chats to her back and forth for a while and start to try and figure out what's going on. And then I start seeing the billboards for St. Agnes. And I think that's where I know this girl from. So I sent my mate a message. I said, listen, I think this girl you're talking to is Jane DeVette. Can you confirm whether this is Jane DeVette? And he says, okay, because I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
I didn't think, what's she doing applying to make study notes at Stellenbosch, So I said to my mate, his name's Ruben, I said to him, just confirm. He said, no, this girl is not Jane DeVette. This is Jane DeVette's best friend. And they just have this profile pic. She just put her profile picture as Jane because she was so proud of her for St. Agnes. So this happened.
So that was true. That wasn't Jane.
No, it wasn't
Jane.
Jane.
Wasn't Jane. Okay.
Fast forward 6 months. I was contacted, let me get the story right. I contacted Simone.
Yes.
Simone, she was Noordman at the time.
Yeah.
Pretoria is now. I contacted her because she had put out the story where she said she wants to do she wants to contact people at the university to try and arrange an anti-gender-based violence event.
Oh, nice.
So the university's president of the student council saw this, sent it to me, said, listen, can you arrange this for this woman? I said, okay, cool. So I contacted her, we chatted for a while, we had a meeting, and then from there, I went to the university and I sort of chatted to all the people I needed to talk to. And Simone said to me, okay, cool. She's going to try and get some of the people she's worked with to sort of join in on the event to get some publicity and so on. And she then said to me, can I think of anyone who I want to invite? And I said, I actually can think of someone. So I sent Jane a DM and she responded to my DM. She said, yes, I'm down to do this anti-GBV event, but she's in Cape Town. So we'll have to coordinate it when she is here, but she would be here a month from then. And we arranged this whole thing, but eventually it ended up not happening because of COVID. So we initially wanted to schedule it for late last year. Then Simone's dad, who was supposed to be the head of the whole, it was like a training course. He was supposed to be the head of this training course. He couldn't do it for a period of time. After that period of time, it would be exams. And then the university would be closed. On top of that, the university told us if we want to book this big field, this venue, we'd have to book 6 months in advance.
Sheesh.
Minimum. And I was so shocked by this because no one uses that grass. It's nothing It was people just walk across it all day. I'm thinking, what do you need 6
Yeah.
months for? But anyway.
That's the
So-
bureaucracy, man.
Exactly. So we ended up saying, okay, cool, we'll schedule it for like late March, because then there's enough time. The university starts in Feb, so there's enough time then for us to get all the necessary key players involved. So I went in the beginning of the year again to David, who's the SOC president, said, okay, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do. Got the green light, and then lockdown. So yeah, and
Story of most people's lives.
exactly, yeah. I have to tell you, it's actually been quite nice. I like working from home.
Oh, is it? Is
Yeah.
that
How do you feel about it?
I've only known that. So when I'm not shooting, I'm working at home writing. So I felt like it was a less of a needed to adapt to less than a lot of people, and I'm used to it. So also I'm used to the insecurity of some months there's no money, some months there's money. So yeah, I also quite liked it.
That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, obviously it's to do with your industry.
Mm.
And I was talking to Nadia Volverkens
Oh yes.
like a week ago, and she was talking about how she obviously left Binnenlanders, like this stable job that she'd had for 13 years.
Yeah.
She left like 2 months before lockdown.
Yeah. It's
And
hectic,
it's
eh?
a massive story, but she was talking about how she didn't struggle to find work, but it was she had to find work. That's the
Yeah.
thing. You do have to look for it. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, I was lucky that the show that I worked on, we wrapped in December. I was directing, so I could edit right through lockdown and still had a salary. But for instance, now that something has moved again, now I have to fill February up with something. So I have to, but it's weird. It's not, sometimes I guess it is go looking for it, but in another way, there's a version of me that I don't know how it works, but I kind of just put my hands in the wind and something comes. It's not that it's necessarily, it's not like somebody's going to come along and give me like millions of rands to make something, but I hear something and then somebody and then suddenly I'll have something to do. I'm lucky because I write, direct and I act. So sometimes it'll be one or the other. But, and then I think I challenge myself where I'm like, but shouldn't I rather be going out there and like finding the funds to make my own things? And so yeah, it's between those two, I guess.
So do you think that moving forward you will be more proactive and try to get bigger projects?
It's one of those things that I've kind of given up on because it's the worst thing for me to do is to ask for money. Like I remember when I was a kid, my friend Brendan, he lived down the street from me. His father worked at, I think, liquid fruit or somewhere, so that he got access to like cost price Capri-Sun juices, and we would walk through the suburbs and sell these things door to door. And for me, I didn't even know what anxiety was, but I almost had a panic attack at every door. I just couldn't ask people for money, even to give them something. And then I ended up in a band where if it wasn't for our lead singer who knew how to tell people, no, you have to come, I'm the worst marketer ever. So, no, I like pitching my ideas, but I don't like going to people and telling them, give me 5 million rand, do not get it. That's not my speciality. So I think it's also getting to know your strengths and your weaknesses. And
I've worked with some people who are like you, and then trying to turn them into a salesperson is difficult. I remember in my first year and last year, we used to, my company sells study notes and tutoring.
Okay.
So what we would do is we'd have, people would order the notes, and if they wanted a hard copy of the notes, we'd set up a station on campus, and 1 day a week, and they could come and buy from us. So within the first few months, something I realized was that a lot of our sales were coming from when 2 people arrive. Okay, so I'm now Jan, I've brought my mate Piet, and we're here to quickly pick up Jan's notes. So now Piet's just standing there. Okay, so now my one of the people who works for me is sort of handling Jan. I go to Piet, say, hey Piet, how are you doing? What are you here for? And then they also, no, I'm just waiting for Jan. And you say, oh, okay, what do you study, Piet?
So you're a natural salesman, obviously.
Well, I mean, it's something I got from my dad as well.
Okay.
So then, the guy will say, well, I'm studying this. Then you say, oh, that's a crazy coincidence. We actually have this available. Then you go, you pick it up, you open it up, you give it, then you get them to hold it. They have a look, and before you know it, you've made 2 sales instead of 1. So when I started being a bit more hands-on with the business in the second year, I was concentrating on training other people to be able to do exactly that. And I mean, it works. If someone,
it's an instinct almost.
If someone can do it, they can be taught to do it well.
Yes.
But if someone can't do it, they can barely be taught to even do it.
Exactly. I think it's like a lot of talents. You're born with the cell in you. Like we had back in the day. I had with my 2 mates, actually 3 mates. We had a record company when we were studying at Stellenbosch, and then eventually even after we. And Stellenbosch has this Nielsen, which is like the student center.
Yes, I'm familiar. I was there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I didn't study there, but
okay.
I went there. I drove down to Cape Town at the beginning of the year with a friend because he's now left Stellenbosch, but lots of his stuff was still there. So and he couldn't put it on a plane. So he and I, at the beginning of the year, we drove 2 days there and then 1 day back.
Sure.
And we stayed there. In the middle was this week where I was meeting all his friends and so on. It's the same guy from the previous time.
Oh, nice.
So went down with him, got his fridge, which scratched the inside of my car to shit.
Oh, shit.
And got like lots of stuff together and came back. So he showed me everything. He showed me the I'm very familiar with the campus,
So they have these wagons in the Nielsen that sell things. And you can rent it and then you use it for your business. So then we decided we need a point of sale place for the... I didn't decide it, my partners decided because they have the cell in the... Ooh, nice. But so anyway, so we took turns to work there. And when I worked there, we sold nothing. Because I just couldn't... If people were like at all... Because I hate it when I'm in a shop and somebody tries to sell me. I'm like, don't. I have the same thing with mimes. If a mime comes to me with... Like, I have a weird thing. So I always felt bad if somebody's like not sure. I'm like, I don't think you need the CD. Go. So it was. Then I just realized I'm the worst salesman ever.
I see. I think it's a difficult skill to teach someone, but I think that you need both people to make a business work. You need different kinds of people because
absolutely.
I feel like people who are more introverted, people who don't sell quite as easily, usually are the people who spot the problems first. At least in my experience, and then because a lot of the time, especially I have this problem as well. I get so like, this idea is amazing, this is going to be good, and I get caught up in the idea and I think it's amazing, and then I don't necessarily see like a big glaring problem staring me right in the face, and then that's when you need like people to keep you
troubleshooters.
Exactly, troubleshooters. So I think it's quite.
I used to see it as they would make the money and I would spend it because I had to make ads or whatever, like get branding done for this thing or that thing, make music videos and stuff like that. So
So how have you managed to come this far?
Without selling anything? Yeah, exactly. I also don't know. No, I think I naturally gravitate in with jobs with people that can do that part. Like as I told you earlier, I'm good at getting the idea down on paper and really making it understandable. But then I need the person that can go speak to the executives and say, check this thing out. I'm not good. I tried it once. I was working on this script about a 1950s story, like a musical comedy. And so I decided this time I'm going to go full tilt. I rented a 1950s suit and glasses. I went into this executive meeting to try and sell them this idea. And I had this whole like speech, like I was acting as if I was a 1950s newsreader, like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And then halfway into this crazy speech with all these visuals, I look over at 2 of the executives on their phones, just like going, I'm like, I'm never going to try and sell again.
Not interested at all.
Not interested.
Yeah, that's hectic. Tell me, how many of your projects or your ideas actually do sort of go through the funnel and the filtration and end up being something
being made?
Yeah, something people can watch.
I've never done the maths on that, but it's I've got 2 folders on my computer, one in the left hand corner and one is the past and one is the future. So whenever I get something done, it goes into the past, and then the future one is a lot fuller, obviously. But I'm lucky, like enough things that I feel like I have enough work have been made that I can at least, I look at it and go, cool, that's at least a body of work that I can somehow be proud of. But it's tough, dude. To get it from here onto paper is tough enough. To get it from there onto is almost impossible.
So something like Hotel, it's such a unique concept, and it's gone on to be so successful. How does something like that go from an idea to the writer's room to...
I was not as intimately involved in it, but I knew the players because Benny and Steyn, who created the show, they also went through the same company, No Vanaand. So it was their idea, and Benny once came and spoke to me because he wanted some advice, because I had just made my first show, and he just wanted to come and get some notes, and I think we connected in a way that then when it became time for auditions, they thought of me for the one role. So I only came on board as a cast member first, and then later, a second season, I started writing along. But so it literally starts with an idea, and then you have to convince somebody with some clout that this is a good idea. They call them CEs, content executives. They have to convince their bosses that this is worth the money. Then you get the development funding, then you write the thing. Might take a year. When it's done and everybody's happy and it's on the third draft, then you get the production budget and you shoot it. Then it broadcasts, and then you hope it hits. And with Hotel, because it was a mockumentary, and it was the first that kind of mockumentary on a Afrikaans channel, the people did not understand it, which I don't get, because they watched The Office.
It was exactly like The Office. It's like the same humor.
Most of the complaints was about the camera work and why is the camera moving. I'm like, because it's a documentary. It's a mockumentary.
It's a mockumentary, yeah.
But they didn't get that. But so luckily, I think it hit just enough. I think also we were lucky that it kind of was the time that DSTV started having these, you can log on with your parents' details. So I think a lot of kids started watching it. And so we got the second season, and then it really started taking off from there.
I think that having young people watch it was probably your biggest asset, because I feel like older people, I'm talking, let's say,
30s and up or
whatever, I don't think they connect to that type of humor as much, and especially if you look at something like The Office. If you go and look at the popularity of The Office, the new popularity of The Office, which is the past 3 years or the past 4 years, is way more than it got when it was still airing. Because now, it's exactly that kind of dry sarcasm that my generation loves.
Exactly.
Like when The Office was on, we were too young to watch it. So now we're coming into the space where suddenly the best TV shows ever are the ones that were filmed in like 2007.
Yeah.
And now we're watching them because the two things just mistimed one another, because the shows were made for a generation that didn't exist yet. Or at least wasn't able to buy their own TVs yet, or whatever. So I think that it might have been the same for Hotel. Not that the generation didn't exist, but that you couldn't get there because maybe the channel wasn't quite right.
Access was an issue.
Well, Showmax didn't exist back then. I think that if you could have if Showmax was a thing then, if you could have started it on Showmax, I think it would have been even bigger. Because obviously the streaming services are more populated by people in that demographic.
Exactly. It's a tough one because you might have been too young, but there was a Afrikaans alternative music channel called MK a few years ago, and it had this amazing run. And but the weird thing was, because it was aimed at that group, which is the young group, they don't have cash to spend because they're kids. So you couldn't convince advertisers to advertise on the channel for the kids because they were like, they're not going to spend their cash. So eventually the channel died because of that. So it is a weird thing where generations. But what I like about making something is the fact that it is kind of a monument. It's going to always be there, especially now with streaming stuff. So if you look at, like, most of the movies that I love was made before I was born, maybe, or at least when I was small. I never watched it until way later after it had become a cult classic because somebody started sending around a VHS tape or whatever. So, and I love that idea that you make something out of time, and eventually time will bring people to it. But it's not of the time. It's like out of time. Just you get people that really nail the moment. I think I don't know if you've watched a show like Euphoria. Euphoria feels like a show that's made for this moment, where it's about transgenderism and teenagers doing drugs, and it feels very current. And maybe in 10 years, people are going to look back at it and say, like, what was that all about? But then I kind of gravitate towards things that they have like a timelessness and a universality to it, which is almost accessible in any generation if the person is right for it. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of media right now that's centered around the idea of transformation and identity.
Totally.
Because I mean, obviously, those are the biggest themes that people are talking about right now.
Yeah.
And the stories that are being told are around that. I think my favorites, especially on Netflix, are Big Mouth.
Big Mouth is an amazing
Big
show.
Mouth is
I love that show.
It's a masterpiece.
I think it's
brilliant.
I wish I was there when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, luckily I caught it like just towards the end of my high school career.
Oh, nice. Yes.
So I mean, Big Mouth is still.
Yeah.
I just watched the new season.
Yes, yeah, we also.
And it's perfect. And if you break the story down, it's a lot of crude humor and it's very cleverly written. But at its core, it's a show about figuring out who you are.
Exactly.
Then you look at something like Sex Education, which
great.
is also fantastic. Got a lot of nuance, but again, it's about identity and it's about change and so on. And you can see that happening in a lot of different media platforms.
Totally, yeah.
I also think that to some extent, the Afrikaans industry lags behind just a smidge.
Always, yeah.
I mean, it's not too big, and I think the gap has gotten smaller. But for example, I remember so for example, gay relationships in shows. For example, men kissing on screen.
Exactly.
That has been in Hollywood for a couple of years.
At least 20 years. Yeah.
Exactly. Now you look at something like Book Club, which came out a couple of years ago. I thought was brilliant. And then the finale of the first season was these two men finally, like coming out and realizing that they are in love with one another.
And it becomes a moment for people freak out.
People freak out. People were extremely upset that this was allowed. Like, what kind of, I watch this with my kids. I don't want them to see that. And you sort of say.
But you have to remember where we come from.
Yes.
Is a very closed-off society that was culturally, Calvinistically extremely conservative. So there's still a big part of that, I think, in us. And for me, I'm a liberal in every kind of way. It's frustrating sometimes because I get where it comes from. I mean, some of my own family members, luckily not my close family, but like even my Oma and Opa when they were still alive, there were some things that would, like, if I had to show them my Opa RuPaul's Drag Race now, he would not know what dimension he was in. He would go, what in the fuck is this? And so I get where it comes from, but I'm also, in a way, I'm like, but it's 2020. How are we still struggling with... I had the exact same... This is a worse example because... Not a worse example, but it's even almost more fundamentally... I couldn't understand it, but I made this show. It's actually the last episode. The 13th episode is tonight. But when we started marketing it, there's an interracial couple. And there's a marketing video where the interracial couple just hug each other. And the racist bile that some people spew on the comment section, I was like, is it the 1940s now? Because they were like really going at it. And I realized that there's just a segment that I never have to deal with or worry about because they are outside of any rationality. And I don't have to feel connected to them because we share a language. I'm not their Afrikaner, they're not my Afrikaner. We're different tribes. And for a while, I struggled with that, but now I'm fine with it. I'm like, if you want to be a fucking racist, we are not the same. We don't belong to any of the same tribes. If you don't like gay people, or even worse, if you're like a homophobic person towards them, go fuck yourself. We're not the same. And I like that I can start. That's the one thing that the internet created for us, is you can now mix and match your own identity. You can be a jock who likes goth clothing, listening to jazz, and you make kombucha. Whereas in the old days, when I was in school, you were a punk, or you were a metal kid, or you were a jock. So I like that I can now go, I am Afrikaans, but I'm also this and that and that and that, and I'm not this and that and that and that. So I like that, but then it becomes hard to make a show for a segment because they're not a segment. And I guess advertisers understand that better, but I don't want to be an advertiser. I want to make stories that like tell stories. So yeah, and the sad thing is, I think as a storyteller, the one size fits all approach never works.
No.
The best show, Big Mouth, is not a one size fits all approach. It's a very specific. Even liberal people don't always like it because they're like, it's just toilet humor. They don't feel the connection to the deeper, as you said, identity and puberty and all those things. So and that's the best stuff, is where it's like really pinpoint into a certain. You can see the creator's own style, or taste is inside the thing.
With Big Mouth specifically, now watching the new season, it's becoming more and more obvious. And this is something I think is so clever, because what they've done, to people who haven't seen Big Mouth, they want to deal with mental health amongst teenagers. So they take mental health issues like depression and anxiety, and they package that into a character.
Yeah.
So now, for example, the character in the newest season for anxiety, like the
mosquito,
is the mosquito. So as people become anxious and start to experience anxiety, this mosquito is like buzzing around their head, saying things to them like, what if it doesn't work, or all the classic anxiety, lines. So, and then as they start to have panic attacks, the mosquitoes grow in volume. So there's more mosquitoes, and then when they have these panic attacks, they're completely covered in mosquitoes, and to the point that they are like choking. And it's crazy that they can put a metaphor that good and that clever into a show that is fundamentally so funny.
Yeah, and crude.
Exactly. So
that's why it works, I think. I think it's those two extremes make for like potent electrical currents in between, which is
yes,
I love that show.
There's also the cat. The cat's very
depression
clever.
cat.
Yeah, so
she just lies on you and just can't get
exactly.
up.
That's
amazing.
like, it's perfect, because I've spoken to people before who have depression, and I've read a lot online about depression, trying to wrap my head around and really understand it. And a lot of people say, with depression, they just cannot get out of bed. They feel like it's weighing on them. So now in Big Mouth, how they've never said it, but you see it, is what happens is this big purple cat, which represents depression. When someone is depressed and they're in bed, it will come lay on top of them, and they'll have this dialogue. And it's never expressly said, but what the idea that's communicated is that as long as that depression is there, they can't get up.
Yeah.
And then watching how now, obviously, at the end of the new season, and I'll try not to spoil anything.
Yeah, I haven't seen the end.
Yeah. So it sort of starts to deal with the enemies of these mental health issue characters. So now there's this mosquito, and it's been plaguing everyone for the entire season. But now the idea of gratitude is represented by a frog,
nice.
And the more grateful these people become for one another, and the more they express that, the more this frog is eating the mosquitoes out of the air. And it seems, to talk about it, it seems silly, but it's so clever because it packages it in a really palatable way.
And the sad thing is that has only been the terrain of drama shows or drama movies, which is not everybody's cup of tea. Like, I don't want to watch a movie about depression for the 60th time where somebody's going through that. But now they're touching the subject that affects all of us in such a way. I think it's brilliant.
But that's also, it's part of the reason why a lot of people say, completely pivoting this conversation out, with regards to Superman. Okay, so people say that Superman movies will never be as good as, for example, Spider-Man movies. And the reason is because the character fundamentally is not relatable.
Yes.
The character's too perfect. It's too easy for Superman to overcome his problems. Whereas for someone like Spider-Man, who's another character that obviously
flawed,
is deeply flawed character who struggles and struggles not only as a superhero but struggles as a person So now if you go and you look at like the box office success of these movies, arguably, I mean, we can debate all day about the production value and blah blah blah, but Superman as a character just doesn't have that same appeal, especially to young people. And now if you look at the newer Spider-Man films, for example, they've sort of been making Spider-Man younger and younger as time goes on. And I think that that's really clever because they're embracing this whole idea of insecurity and you know.
The Spider-Verse was one of the best movies of that year. I thought it was one of the best animation movies, but best movies of the year, I think, as well.
I agree.
But you bring up something funny to me that I've recently been also, not like deep diving on, but I've done a little bit of research and compared and watched interviews and a few cool video essays on YouTube, which is about the idea that, so obviously everybody got the memo, the Me Too movement is happening and it's good and it's happening, and girl power and everything that comes along with that and the third wave feminism and everything. But then corporations try to distill that into their stories by making female-centric superhero movies or Ghostbusters or whatever. And then when it doesn't hit, they blame men and boys for not being able to accept female characters that are strong and everything. But if you go look at those movies, those are badly written, one-dimensional characters that don't have enough flaws. Captain Marvel is almost more powerful than Superman. No, except for that, she's witty. She's the same with the new Charlie's Angels movies. All three of them are smart. They can fight. They can strategize. Whereas the old one, like a good narrative, each character has a little role to play, and together they might be stronger. But it's like these people are trying to preach instead of telling stories, and they're doing a disservice to young girls because now they're getting this one-dimensional Captain Marvel-esque and it's sad because then they blame the division, but I don't think it's the division. I think it's bad writing, and I think it's actually something that you can very easily solve. And now it's probably it's gonna go through that whole Breaking Bad cycle where it's gonna be a few female anti-heroes with deep flaws, and then they're gonna go through that whole thing. So I guess it's just the natural growth of it all. But it's just sad for me that it's because it's lost opportunities. I think.
I agree. It's called, the thing that companies do is called virtue signaling.
Exactly, virtue signaling, yeah.
They do it a lot. They do it with everything. I mean, when you have Pride Month as well, you see a lot of companies pushing these agendas that they support in their ads, but which they don't necessarily support through their practices.
Exactly. There was a great meme about that where it was I think it was Republicans and Democrats, and then they listed everything. Supports wars, capitalist to the T, blah, 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 blah. And the two are exactly the same, except the Democrats have this rainbow flag on it. They signal that they're better, but they do the same things. And I think companies are exactly the same. Because it's not humans. A company is a limited liability, separate entity than a human. So it makes sense that there's not the same fundamental human feeling connected to it. You can kind of blame it. It's not me, it's just the way it is in a company practice or ethics of the company.
I see. So, I mean, you've got such a unique opportunity because as someone who's working in entertainment, as someone who is a writer, you have the opportunity to take all your beliefs around how to write a really good character that is, modern and just excellent storytelling. You have the opportunity to actually walk into a writer's room and put that on paper. So
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you? I mean, I don't know to what extent you've sort of done it in the past, but what are you trying to do in your own personal writing capacity to improve the characters that you're writing?
So for instance, my first thing that I did was called Buurtwag, a neighborhood watch. I did it when I was 29. I wrote it and I directed it, and it was a 13-part series. Completely bombed on CapeNet. Although I loved it, and the feedback that I got from my peers and the industry was amazing, but the the viewers were like, because it was the guys were like drinking and driving and smoking joints at the dam and all those things. And as we said earlier, it's a bit of a conservative audience. And I was very like holy about it. And then a year later, and I watched him again, and I realized that my female characters are not really as strong, like not as strong, but not as deeply developed necessarily. They have some nice flourishes. And it's like something opened in me, and I realized that I heard about something called the Bechtel Test. I don't know if you know that. But the Bechtel Test is like a test to do with your project or your story to see if and it's a checklist. Do your female characters have conversations that are not about men? Do they have agency to do something other than what is the traditional female role in a story? And it's this whole checklist, and I was like, oh fuck, I've like missed a bunch of them. And then you start trying to better that, and you start writing. Your next thing would be like, firstly, you need to be able to really be realistic about that. And it's tough because you write from the male gaze, and you need to overcome that firstly. And then you need to tap into like the joint humanity. Like, so with the new series that me and my partner wrote, we had a nice thing where and I heard it that Chekhov wrote like that, where he only assigned genders to his characters later. And I was like, I love that idea, because then it's humans dealing with human issues, and then later you decide if it's because otherwise it's always going to feed into the identity politic sphere, where it's all about my identity and not about the shared struggles of humanity. And I think that becomes a bogged down mess eventually, because identity politics is slowly, it is doing good as well, but it's also tearing society apart at the moment. I think just in the way that everybody's got their own idea about identity politics and how to convince people or just like shut them down or whatever. So it's the way we're going about it is with divisions are deeper than ever. And some people say it's the growth spurts of a new mentality about that, and I guess it is, but I don't see it ending well necessarily. The way it's run now, where it's all about alienation and all about, if you're not on my side, you're the enemy. Instead of being like a 40% ally. If you think about how societies have survived through the ages, you've had to sometimes compromise to get an ally for this campaign. It's like, I don't know if you've ever played Warcraft 2 or whatever. It's like that. You know, you need to kind of strategize with your buddies and then do this campaign, and then we'll help you to build that thing, and then I'll help you do that. And I don't think that's happening at the moment. But so with the writing, it's all about bettering yourself and realizing where your blind spots, and not being gentle on yourself. Like, I was a dumb 29-year-old guy making a show. And in my own defense, it was a show about a bunch of men driving around, and so it was male-centric. But then I also could kind of explain it to myself that I only have brothers. I went to a boys' school. I was in a boys' res. Then I went to university in a boys' res. And I lived in the digs with a bunch of boys. I haven't had that many girlfriends. So I was like, obviously it's going to be slowly crawling out of the shell. But getting to a place where you can write strong characters that are also channeling your beliefs, but not just your beliefs. Because that's the other thing, is if your antagonist doesn't have an equally strong perspective on life, then the whole story feels flat and one-dimensional. You need to also be able to make a case for your antithesis of your story. And that is what I find interesting, and that's like my new challenge, is like, you must also almost write your story out of your antagonist's viewpoint as well. Because for him, what he's doing is right. He's even if it's destroying the world, he's got a reason for it. He's not just evil. You know,
yeah, that's something that's changed a lot lately. Like the past couple of years, it's been happening where the villain of the story is becoming so fleshed out.
Exactly.
And you get this, especially I'm going back now to superhero movies, because those are probably some of my favorite movies. But this whole idea of a movie is only as good as its villain. And I think it's true to a large extent. I think it's really true. If you go and you look at some of the films, I mean, if you look back 10 years or 15 years, you look at some of the older movies in that genre, the sort of villain, or even if you look at other films, drama films, blah, 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 you've always got the antagonist, is very, very flat. You know,
Yes.
they present it as this is the antagonist.
Yes.
Nobody likes him because he's an asshole.
Exactly.
And if it's a villainous character, it's like you said, yes, just like Doctor Evil, just want to
Yes.
destroy the world.
Yes.
That's what they want. They crave to destroy the world. But that's no good because it's not relatable.
Exactly.
Then you fast forward, 15 years to today, and you see things like, I think the great crowning example is Thanos from the
because he's
Avengers
got a very
movies.
good reason for
I mean,
doing.
you can sit back and think, actually, this guy's got a really good
He's
point.
got a point.
Like, he's got a really good point.
Exactly.
Then you look at Black Panther, which was this iconic.
I still haven't seen that.
Oh my word!
Yeah.
How have you not seen Black Panther?
I have this thing where if the hype is too big, I need to watch it later when the hype is over.
We'll watch it after. We'll watch it on the TV. I'll get some popcorn. But yeah, I mean, Black Panther. So the villain in Black Panther is played by Michael B. Jordan.
Okay.
His name is Killmonger. Although I don't think they call him Killmonger throughout the film. His name in the comics was Killmonger.
Okay.
But anyway, his idea basically. So you've got Wakanda, which is a super hyper advanced country with hyper advanced weaponry, hyper advanced everything, because they've got this one resource that no one else has. But how Wakanda's lived for thousands of years is completely isolating themselves. So they do have like foreign dignitaries and all that, and they portray themselves as this very poor third world country, but in actual fact they're the most advanced civilization on earth. And they just don't want anyone else to know because they can see how things are. I mean, it's like when someone in Iran puts a pick into the ground and outspouts some oil, suddenly here's the US military ready to go. So they want to stay away from that. They don't want conflict. They just want to live in peace. So this villain is a young boy who, if I don't want to get this wrong. He leaves Wakanda. I can't remember if he lived there for a while first or if he just knows about it or whatever. Michael B. Jordan's character leaves Wakanda. He grows up as a mercenary, like this, tough guy. And as he goes through the world as a mercenary, he's experiencing deep racism and seeing that black people are always oppressed. African people are always oppressed. And his idea is, why don't we use the technology from Wakanda, give it to them, we have so much, and just make it a fair fight. So, I mean, sitting in the theater, obviously he's the villain. Obviously you like the Black Panther. He's really cool. He's got the cool suit. Chadwick Boseman obviously was an incredible actor. And you like him. But you get the other guy's point. Because he is coming from, you can have perspective on his background.
But the sad thing about that is that we can get it right in movies, but we can't get it right as a species. Where I can't see my enemy's reasons for doing. It's funny. My father had a political career back in the day, and so he raised me and my brothers with the idea of, if you want to get things done, you need to sit with people and you need to understand the guy across from you that wants exactly the opposite from you. If you don't understand him, you're not going to get anywhere. And it feels to me that these days people are just isolating themselves with their perspective. Obviously the internet doesn't help because it's an echo chamber of only your own beliefs are being bombarded back to you. So you think everybody thinks like you, and then the moment you get confronted by somebody that is from a completely different, there's almost a refusal to cross that Rubicon. And that's why it feels like the whole world is kind of in this weird stasis, because we're not moving anywhere, because everybody's refusing to give an inch here, give an inch there, and keep the dynamic flow of humanity doing things. And it's sad for me because I think it's once again just a lost opportunity.
Have you seen the social dilemma?
Yes, yeah.
I can hear some of it in what you're saying. The social dilemma, for me, I mean, obviously the social dilemma is about social media, but it highlights so many problems with us as people.
Absolutely.
And so for example, one of the big things, and you touched on it now, is the echo chamber.
Yes.
So with social media, when you're talking to, or when you're consuming media and you're liking certain things, for example, Facebook or Instagram is, as you are engaging with things, and it's everything from what are you liking to what are you watching and for how long are you watching it, what keeps you coming back to the app, what do you see that makes you leave the app. So they have these machine learning algorithms that basically will give you the information you want to see, and it's very complex. So I opened my Instagram page, first time ever. I've never opened Instagram before, and I now start consuming liberal content.
Yes.
Okay? So I see someone posting, so there's someone who's gay. They're posting a photo. I like that photo. Immediately, Instagram ticks a box. Has no problem with gay people, probably liberal. Okay. Then I go. Then I see something that liberals traditionally don't like. Like, let's say, smoking. Okay. See something smoking, and I just scroll past it very quickly. Instagram knows, okay, not interested in that, won't do that again.
Change the algorithm.
Exactly. And so the algorithm learns and it learns and it learns to the point where all you're seeing is liberal content all the time. And it might not be like, it's not blatant, like vote, vote, vote. It's just things that align with your views, and that's all you're seeing. So now you go on and you switch on the news and you see someone who's, raging Republican conservative type person, very angry, and you go, well, is that guy crazy? Is he not seeing what I'm seeing on social media? And the answer is no.
He's not at all seeing what you're seeing.
He's not seeing even close to the same thing you're seeing. The two of you are being given complete different information about what the world looks like, and that's what your opinion is based on. So it's so interesting. I've always said, I've said to people, I'm one good conversation away from changing all my views.
Exactly.
And you have to be that
way. But the fact is, but that's a very good way to look at things, because if you're willing to change, I think being malleable is the only way forward. Because I also think if you think on a cellular level, what happens to your neurons and things is it starts calcifying if you refuse to have different opinions affect you. You're like, nope, this is what I believe, and no amount of anything will change that. So I think a way to almost not stop aging, but like at least keep your brain robust, is to be open to opinions. Even if usually a differing opinion just makes yours stronger, because you have to challenge it. You have to bounce against something and go, ooh, I knocked this piece of my castle over, but this other part is quite strong now, because now I know that's the kernel of what I really, my real opinion was.
Yeah, I'm going to do a podcast quite soon. I'm trying my best to schedule it with her, but it's difficult. She's got a very sort of, her communication's not that good. But there's a girl named Zulaika Patel. She's this activist, and I don't know if you remember, like 3 years ago there
Fees Must Fall.
Fees Must Fall was, I think, maybe a little bit before her, but the hair thing. So the whole that's where you remember it. So she was one of the leaders of the whole
it was about indigenous hair being as acceptable as
exactly. So in schools that had been historically white for a long time and then changed to multiracial after apartheid fell, those schools had not updated some of their rules and were still applying rules as if all their students are white. So now you get someone who comes in with with dreads, and it's not acceptable. But I think to a certain extent there needs to be an honest conversation. Like, people need to sit across from the table and say, okay, we as a school, we want our students to look neat. What does neatness look like to you?
Exactly.
What does neatness look like to me? Because I think that even within all the full spectrum of African, exactly,
absolutely,
within the spectrum of African hairstyles, some will be considered neat and some won't. Okay, so cut out the ones that are unneat.
Yeah, you mean between them?
Yeah, amongst them, and then amongst white people, there are for example, our school would never have allowed us guys to have long hair. For example, it was considered unneat, so we weren't allowed to do that. So there need to be not necessarily different rules for different people, but it needs to be all encompassing, and
but that's the lifelong project of our country, is having 12 different, actually probably 60 different, because between the different cultures there's also inside, but finding the overlap and deciding, is that what being South African is all about? And we had it because of the way Mandela was. I think we convinced ourselves it's going to be easier than we think to be this one thing. And now we're learning that it's not going to be easy. It's not. I don't think it's impossible. I grew up as a Rainbow Nation child because I was right slap bang in school when Nelson Mandela was flaring at his hardest. So I bought into the dream, and it's kind of lodged in the back, like deep in my soul. So I can't get rid of the fact that I believe we can actually make it work together. But it's we spoke about it earlier, growth pains, and the growth pains now are this battery is almost dead.
Oh, it is. Shit, let's
it up.
Quick. We're back.
We're back.
we took a break for the audio issues. Where were we?
I was talking about that I think the Rainbow Nation is still possible. We're probably going to have to get another name for it because that one has now, I guess, run its course. But the main concept of it being possible that a country like this can exist and actually flourish, I'm kind of stuck on that idea still, and I think it's possible.
I agree with you. I had the other day I posted on my meme page. I posted and I was talking to my followers about different ideas, and I said to them that I think racism is an issue that can be solved. Like it's a solvable issue, and quite a lot of people said that I was naive and that I had, it was a crazy idea to think that it could be solved.
People should always remember that they think racism. Sorry for interrupting you. Racism is innate. It's not. It's a new concept that was thought out. If it was something innate that we struggled with for 250 years as a species, 250,000 years as a species, but it's not. We thought it up later.
Yes.
So I don't think it is overcomable. It's not like it's a software issue, not a hardware issue.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. I've got a book there on the shelf.
Sapiens.
The one a couple next to it. It's called Racism. A Brief History.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It's brilliant.
Yeah,
and it's a book about where racism came from.
Yes.
Because we can trace it.
Exactly.
You can literally trace it to the decisions of a few people.
Yes, and the writings
exactly.
Yeah.
And as with most things, it was a for-profit decision. So if you go back, I'll just sort of sum it up very briefly, but it had to do with slavery. Because back in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, race wasn't a thing. There was no one spoke about race. There was a good mix of people. And for them, I mean, obviously Africa was as of yet pretty much undiscovered then, but they did have
contact with Ethiopia.
Yeah, exactly. Northern African people. So they were like dark Africans amongst the Colosseums and all that. So they, they had this multiracial society where no one spoke about it, and it was perfect. Then the Europeans learned about slavery from the Middle Easterns. It was a Middle Eastern concept. So they learned about slavery from the Middle Easterns. They then started enslaving their own people. Okay, so the Middle Easterns had slaves, but the slaves of the Middle Easterns were other Middle Easterns. There was no racism there. It was more classist.
Apparently, the Tuareg still have slaves. And some of I think in Mali or something.
Yes. So then they taught this concept to the Westerners, to the the Europeans and so on. They then applied that concept, and for a while they were enslaving their own people as well. So the slaves in Rome and so on were just other people. They weren't a specific racial
towns that they conquered or whatever.
Then something clicked.
Yeah.
Because suddenly there was a massive influx of people coming in from Africa.
Yeah.
So this was when ships were starting to become, very efficient and people were getting good at it. Suddenly the slave markets are filled with Africans. Yeah. Okay, people of darker complexion were filling the slave markets. Not just by coincidence. It wasn't like, we're going to go find these people to enslave. It just happened to be the people that were available. So then, as people started to become smarter and realize, the slavery thing isn't all that cool. Like I feel like a bit of a dick when I'm a slave owner. Now the slave companies realize they have to do something to make these people feel better. Yeah. So they created this idea of slaves are lesser. Yeah. So you don't have to feel bad. It's okay. It's so fine.
Fucking evil.
Exactly. To think you don't have to feel bad when you treat your slave badly because they're not the same as us. They're lesser. So this idea of racism was
thought out.
birthed there.
It was a marketing campaign.
It was a marketing campaign.
It's fucking sick.
Isn't that crazy?
But that's what I love about the fact that we're talking about this now. And even like the Black Lives Matter thing, at first I was like very into it, and then I started reading more about it, and I had to like do quite a bit of a pivot about the whole concept, because there was a lot of false narratives coming out of from all the sides. And I just had a bit more like, I took like 2 steps back. But I think it's interesting and very necessary conversations. And but what I like about that is, for long there's been this narrative that's been also sold, and it's kind of trying to correct that idea that poor Africa was just this amazing little paradise with people all innocent and just living happy lives, and these evil people came here. But that takes away the agency of the whole continent of people that lived and thrived here for millions of years, having their own kingdoms and their own power and their own, like, that's what I like about that we can now speak about narratives a bit more truthfully. That it's never just like this binary thing. Oh, evil and good. It's always a very more complex issue, and I like that we can say that. Like there's, for instance, there's this issue they called the Mfakani, that when the voortrekkers came to the Gauteng plains, it was empty, and so they started populating it, and eventually gold was discovered and everything. I'm obviously lazing over a bunch of these facts now, but to try and digest it. I have to try and compress it. But so it was a mystery. How could they? There were still signs of many civilizations here, but it was empty enough that a very small band of Buddha could kind of just live here. And for long there was this thing. No, they brutally came in, but the narrative didn't make sense, because how could a small group of people just conquer a whole like 4 or 5 tribes that lived here? It doesn't make sense. So the Mfakane story is that some massive war or something broke out, or a famine, something like obliterated a shit ton of people. But what was funny for me when I heard about the Mfakane, I was doing research for something, and there were already like scholars disputing the fact, and they were saying no, but it was only white missionaries who wrote about the idea of the Mfakane. But the moment you start digging and you go deeper into it, you have to realize it's more complex than that. Like, just having, as we said with narratives, just having a bunch of evil people come to a place and take it over can't possibly explain how things really turned out. That's the other thing with apartheid. Like, apartheid, as evil as that was, for it to have worked for as long as it did, it had to have a bunch of effective mechanisms inside of the thing. That's how. But even fucking Hitler was effective at certain things, and then a whole slew of horrible things. And you have to be able to remove yourself far enough from the issue to go, I can actually learn from this, instead of burying it and like never to be spoken of like Lord Voldemort or whatever. And that's a place that I wish we can get to as a species, where we can, even the things that we hate and abhor and we completely want stopped, we should still scientifically look at it and go, but that and that and that works about it. That's why it worked. Now we understand how it worked.
It's part of the reason why, I mean, under apartheid, the South African economy did very, very well.
No.
And it's not because it was a racist country. It's because we had good economic policies at the time.
And cheap labor, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that was but exactly that is like, so the cheap labor side you would take and go, okay,
that's
that thing we throw out, and this thing we throw out, that bad carburetor we throw out. But in terms of for anything to work that long, you need the buy-in of a lot of people, or at least, because if you look at it, it took that long for a revolution strong enough to overthrow it. Now, what was that? To deny that in those 50, 60 years, people were living and breathing and doing things and taking part in, or in their own little way, challenging it, you're skipping history. And I hate that these days we're trying to kind of skip history, if you know what I mean. Or it feels to me like it a bit.
I do.
Yeah.
I understand. I think it's very clever and it's very insightful to look at something as a whole, be able to emotionally remove yourself and
Yes.
say, despite the fact that I strongly disagree with this, let's break it down and let's figure out exactly what was wrong. Take that away and be left with
Yes.
the actual, good bits. And I think that's got to do a lot with polarization today.
Totally.
Is because it's so easy. I think here is a good example, but in the US it's probably the best example, is where people think, I am part of this group, I cannot agree with anything that
Yes,
person says because
exactly.
they're in the other group. And it's not like that. It's like you said earlier, where you've got the checklist of things that both sides
Yes.
agree. They agree on 95%
Yes.
of issues. They disagree on like 3 things,
Mm.
and now they won't talk to one another.
And I think if you look at South Africa, it's probably, there's a lot of touch points between the groups. I've always thought, you know how they do blind wine tests, where you don't know what wine you're drinking and you have to rate them. I've always thought about doing like a racial blind test, where like there's like almost like a dating show. There's like a screen and you can't see who they are, but you can ask them questions like, do you like braai and beer and all and it sounds superficial, but you can go into deeper cultural things as well. How do you feel about women? And I honestly believe that 99% of people won't be able to differentiate between an Afrikaner and a Zulu. Because they firstly, it's a bit paternalistic. They love beer, they love braai. The men need to be very like macho. There's just a bunch of cultural touchstones that we agree on. So, but we and this is interesting that what you said earlier about racism being a marketing for capital for profit. Division in modern, like today, division is also for profit, I believe, because people divided are easier to control, easier to sell things to because they're scared. Scared people are easy to do anything with, and that's why young parents, new parents, and pet owners are being fucking flogged to death because they know you have a captured market. These people are so afraid of the baby that they need to keep alive that I can charge them 15,000 rand for a fucking stroller. And the same with pets. No, you need antidepressants for your dog. You're so afraid of this little human thing. So, and that's why the way polarization is also being driven by the market, I believe. Because it works. A united humanity is not going to be as easy to manipulate. No. Not that I'm not saying the lizard people are real. I'm just saying that's the difference between people who deny COVID and like I accept COVID, but I also accept that it's the perfect opportunity for people in power to power grab even more because it's a emergency state of emergency.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What is your position on how let's take just the South African government first,
Yes.
and then we can talk a little bit more on a global scale. What's your opinion on how it's been handled?
I believe that we softened the blow of the first wave effectively. It was shocking that the grant money was fucking stolen. But I believe that the right thing to do was a lockdown. It's even if it was just to buy us a little bit of time to prepare a bit more. Even if it was just to stitch more fucking masks. Just to I was against most of the haphazard new legislation about, for instance, cigarettes and stuff like that. I'm not a smoker, but I couldn't understand because it's the same as keeping people that are addicted to heroin away from access to good, clean heroin. Is they're going to find it on the black market. And all my smoking friends kept smoking back alley shit that they found. Same with alcohol. It was a bit of a wake-up call to see how much of an alcohol problem we have as a country.
It's a really big problem.
It's a problem.
No, I agree with you.
And whether being a nanny state is the answer, I'm not sure. But since then, I don't know. I'm frustrated with the whole situation, but I'm not. I look at the government and I'm like, I don't think you're perfect at what you're doing, but it looks like you're trying. But what's been done to small businesses is a massive fuck up. And I don't know how we're going to recover from that. And I'm not smart enough economically to say how we should have done it differently. Because people keep spouting the Swedish model. It's not. This thing is not over, and you can't. A lot of Swedish people are saying it wasn't the best thing to do. And I think America is the other extreme, where they're in an interesting situation because half of the country refuse to wear masks. And look how it's going there. So the mask has to have some effect. But they've long not been the United States of America. They're like two countries that are kind of like that. But it's two countries with two completely different outlooks on life. We have, I guess, 11, 12, 60 different visions of life. But yeah, what's your opinion of how it's been handled?
I think that it was sort of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Because I changed my mind very dramatically sort of towards the beginning. I was a guy who said herd immunity is the way to go. And the reason why I said that is because the scientists at the time were saying a vaccine was 3 years away.
Yes.
And I said there's no chance. We cannot lock down the economy for 3 years.
Yeah.
It can't be done. And I still stand by that. So
I agree with you completely.
But obviously I missed out on a lot of the nuance that ended up happening. So I said, can't lock down the economy for 3 years. My initial idea was, or my initial opinion was, if we are going to have 10% of the population die, okay, that's awful. That would be the worst thing in the history of the human race, probably up there, okay? If that were to happen, should it happen in a period of 6 months, or should it happen in a period of 3 years? I was of the belief that
you're a numbers cruncher guy, I see. You were like taking the stats and comparing it.
So I was of the belief we should get it over with as soon as possible, and we should rip the band-aid off and get to the recovery. Let's figure out how we're going to deal with a post-coronavirus world. Okay, that was my idea. Then,
so in terms, so keep it open.
Keep it as open as possible.
Sanitize, and
exactly.
masks.
People who are at risk should stay home. But for the sake of, you see a lot of people on Facebook, especially whenever News 24 posts about new lockdown stuff, people comment like you have to put on a toxic waste suit before you go into those
sludge festival.
It's terrible. But you go in, and then there's some people saying there's another pandemic called poverty that's killing more people right now. And whilst I think that, to some extent it's a little bit of an exaggeration or maybe it's taken out of context, to take people's jobs away from them for people who are living paycheck to paycheck is a death sentence. I mean, it's like, it's over.
We see it now. It's only starting now.
Exactly.
The swell of joblessness. And I agree with you. I also thought that living in Joburg is for me as a Cape Townian, it's eye-opening, and I've been living here for 3 years now. And so people here, there's so much humanity here, and that needs to be done. That there's the wheel just turns for everyone in a different way. So I feel like if you're a hustler, you'll kind of be able to get something to do in Joburg. And for a long time, even like we stay on quite a busy road, and there's a lot of homeless people, but it's not. I've spoken to some of them, and they're not homeless. They come to Joburg for work, but they can't afford to stay here. So they kind of sleep under the verandas. They're not like what I would call classic homeless people who don't have anywhere to go and sometimes have substance abuse problems. They're more like just people looking for a job. But the group under my building where I live, there's now like 20 people there now, and it's just there. And it's not that I'm feeling threatened or anything. I can just see it's like the statistics that you read in the paper. In Joburg you can actually see it. And I think, apparently in Cape Town there's 14,000 homeless people in Cape Town as well now. So for me, the eye-opening thing was realizing how many people in South Africa only have, if anything, a month to 2 months of padding.
Oh, max.
Before they ran out.
A month to 2 months is
even middle class people.
Yes.
If you start taking all the debt that they have and all their accounts that need to be debited at the end of the month. Even middle class people are 2 months away from total ruination.
Yeah,
That's fucking scary.
I saw a statistic about the American population a while ago, which said it was some ridiculously high number. It was like 60 or 70% of American people cannot incur an unexpected expense more than $400 outside of their usual expense. They can't do it. So what that's basically saying in plain English is they don't have $400 in savings.
Yes.
Okay, so 400 or less. So I think $400 is around at 50 now. So we're talking about what's that, $6,000?
Yeah.
I mean, $6,000. $6,000. What's $6,000? I mean, $6,000 is a trip to the hospital and back if you've hurt your ankle. So,
but I think it's true for 80% of South Africans.
I agree. So yeah, it's crazy to think that, and that's why I had this opinion at the start. Is because I thought, I mean, we already are so close. So many people are so close to the edge already.
Yes.
And we're still, some people were over the edge.
Yes.
They've just crawled over it. They're only going to push them back over the edge into crippling poverty.
Yeah.
So my initial idea was, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's
face it head on.
Let's face this thing head on. We'll deal with the collateral. I felt like we were better equipped to deal with the collateral than we were to deal with the virus. Okay. So that happened.
That to me, that sounds like a sound argument for that time.
So I spoke on my meme page. I have about 10,000 followers. Which means
really? Nice, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
I've got like 10,000 different opinions of people who I can connect with. So put this out there. I wrote like practically an essay on my story talking about this is my idea. This is what I think. Talk to me. And people hated my idea. I mean, some people loved it, some people hated it, and they hated it with good reason.
Yeah.
And I debated with a few people. I mean, people I ended up becoming good friends with, like through this, chatting back and forth to these people about their ideas. So there were people who said, lockdown is absolutely what we need to do because of this and this and this. So hindsight is 2020, and we can look back now and say, I think most of us can agree lockdown was generally a good idea.
Yes.
Because we can very clearly see
Yes.
that as soon as you lift that lockdown a little bit, the numbers spike. You can see it. It's like it's clear as day for anyone to see. So we can clearly say lockdown was probably a good idea.
Yeah.
But then you've got other things which may be not so good of an idea. So for example, this one's controversial. Restaurants. Like, restaurants should not have opened as early as they did.
Absolutely.
Like, especially, I've been to restaurants in the past few weeks. You get there, mask off. COVID does not exist anymore.
I was stopped in a mall with an open restaurant where people sit and eat open, and even the waiters were open. But I had to buy, the security guard stopped me, and I had to buy a mask. I forgot my mask, and my friend had it there. But I was like, but those people are literally open. So this is where it starts. The nitpickingness of policy like this becomes super complicated, and I think the problem is that if you're one of the people that whatever your endeavor is, your business or whatever, falls in the cracks of the nitpicking, then it's a calamitous fuck up for you and your people. And if you're lucky, it's like now, the Western Cape is now, after last night's announcement, the beaches are open. But the Eastern Cape closed, and the Garden Route, which is in the Western Cape, the Garden Route is closed as well. So if your town is like just outside of the Garden Route, you're fine. You're going to have your tourism, you're going to have your economic injection in December, and if you're there, you're dead.
But think about it this way, because it's kind of like a sliding scale, and there is no win-win. There's no perfect solution here.
Absolutely not.
For every win, there's a loss.
Exactly.
Like, absolutely. In this situation, every time someone wins by getting to keep their business open, someone else dies.
Totally.
If someone else is saved by keeping the business closed, they die because they lose their business. So death obviously doesn't happen in all the scenarios, but it's the extreme. It's the extreme one. So it's like a sliding scale. If we've got deaths on this side, we've got
economic
deaths by COVID, deaths by poverty.
Yes.
You slide it over. We're going to reduce the deaths by poverty by opening up. The deaths by COVID are going to go up. You take the other way, this side comes with. There's no disconnecting the two.
But I guess the big question is, because a lot of people will say, how can we upend civilization like this for something with a 99.2 survival rate? And then, for a 99.2 or whatever percent survival rate, but they don't look at the collateral that comes with if a spike happens and the hospitals are flooded. and your normal sicknesses can't get into the hospital and they die. People look at like the front line of the trees and they don't see the jungle behind it. And they're like, no, it's easy. It's as clear as daylight. But as you said, now it's a sliding scale. The collateral to both sides. It's so complicated.
But people argue a lot about the COVID deaths because people will say, how could you, if someone was already dying of AIDS and now they get the coronavirus and they die, how could you attribute that to COVID? That's not a COVID death. That's a AIDS death. Which I suppose to some extent is true. And those people think, oh, we're vastly overestimating how many people die of COVID. But then the counter argument is, okay, I get your point. But what about the other side of the coin where someone who wasn't doing too badly, they had diabetes or AIDS or heart problems, they were okay. Now they can't get access to medical services because of COVID. They died. They never even had COVID. But they died because of COVID's effects. I think the two numbers probably balance each other out. In fact, I think it probably tips more towards the side of people are dying because of COVID, not because they got COVID.
Yes, I think
so. It's a shit show. Hey?
But and that's why I'm not as critical to the government. Obviously, flaws galore. Flaws galore. Sounds like a band.
Sounds like a company that sells floors.
Yeah, come and buy a floor. But I'm not as, because the meetings must go like this, but for 5 days. Where, but have you thought about this? But have you thought about this? And there's no, as you said, there's no win-win.
Yes.
There's no win-win.
I was talking to a mate of mine. He works in politics. He works for the DA. He used to be, in the political space at the university. Then he moved over. And I was talking to him about politics, and I pitched this idea to him, which was called the panel government. Okay, so we completely abolish all political parties. From now on, the government is made up only of a table of ministers. Okay, you've got a big table. We divide the economy up into different sectors, or we divide the country up into sectors, right? Not location sectors, but economic sectors, social sectors, blah blah blah, sport, etc. Divide it up, and we have this big table. Every person, every seat at the table represents a facet of our lives. So you'll have Minister of Sport. I'm sitting here. It says sport on the back of my chair. You're Minister of Finance. You're Minister of International Relations, blah, blah, blah. Got everyone. Now, the people who fill those chairs are experts. I don't want any of this political bullshit where
the Carter appointment.
Exactly. I was this guy. He's my mate. He was with
you need to be the top of
you need to be the best. So if you have the Minister of Agriculture, we're not going to go pick some random political guy. We're going to pick literally the person in the country who knows the best, who knows agriculture the best. So we'll take applications. One of the problems the guy said to me was there's going to be 100,000 applications. I agree. I think we should just filter them through okay, cool. You only have matric. 3 points. You have a degree in agriculture, 5 points.
Or you have matric, but you have a farm.
Exactly. You've been running a farm. It's this many hectares. It grows this many things. 5 years or 50 years, you way outweigh this guy who only has a degree, etc. There's points. Okay. Top 5 people. Their names get put on TV. Hi, hello. I'm Frick. This is what I do. This is my farm. I ran this farm for 50 years. We do all this. I also own this company which distributes agricultural products. I'm now retired. I'd like to please be your Minister of Agriculture.
It's like idols, and we
exactly.
Vote.
Yes, we vote as a country, and we can have what's the guy's name? The idols. The guy who's always he's like kind of the host, but not really.
Oh yeah, Simon Cowell.
No, not on South African Idols. He's like the guy who says hello and brings him up onto the stage. I can't remember his name, but he's well known. But we have that sort of thing, right? So everyone knows who everyone on the panel is. We all voted for them. So now, got this panel government. That's first thing. Everyone's super smart, very qualified people. And not only are they smart at what they do, but they can very clearly see how the other things affect them.
Yes.
So if I'm Minister of Agriculture and suddenly the Minister mining and energy are busy chatting
about fracking.
Fracking, they say, no, if we do fracking, we can really, this works for both of us. And you can say, hold on, it doesn't work for me.
Groundwater is going to be contaminated.
Exactly. So, you have a panel government. That's step 1. Step 2, complete transparency, okay? 24-hour cameras on this table, live broadcast. We have a new SABC channel that everyone has access to. Also on radio, everyone can listen in and see exactly how decisions are made and why they are made the way that they're made. Okay, So we've got this panel government set up. All the smartest people in the country are there. They're representing their respective industries and sectors and blah, blah, blah. Everyone in the country can see what is going on. So there's no more bullshit of, why did they do this? Why did they raise taxes? Like, you know why they raised taxes. You can go
watch the debate.
Exactly. You watched the debate. You watched the Minister of Finance debating with the Minister of Public Health or whatever. You watched them talk about it and, negotiate and so on. Then the last thing is the public, because there's a lot of smart people out there. The public is allowed to submit comments. Have you seen that new channel where they stream 24 hours a day? They stream game drives. Have you seen it? It's amazing. So when COVID started, all these lodges are, screwed. So what they did is, especially up in like Tanzania, they've got these cameras on these game drive vehicles. And they have like, let's say 50 vehicles at a bunch of different game farms or lodges across the country. Some in South Africa, some up north, or norther than us. So they've got these cameras, and then this guy will click, hey, I'm on a leopard. Then they'll switch through to his camera. Then it's a game ranger saying, hi, okay, so behind me, it's a leopard. This is how it works. So it's brilliant. You should definitely go check it out.
That sounds amazing.
Then it's 24/7. Then on the bottom of the screen, there's this bar. And basically, people can send in questions via social media. And those game drivers can hear the questions or see them or whatever. Talk about it. So it happens. I watch that channel for hours. So it comes up. Bam. Right behind me here is a herd of zebra. Question pops up from Mart in North Namibia. Question pops up. How can you tell the males from the females? He sees it in real time. He says, well, Mart, it's a great question. This is how you... Exactly. This is how you tell the males from the females, blah, blah, blah. This is how the hierarchy works, etc. So now, panel government, we've got a similar system. People are allowed to submit their questions, okay? The minister, every minister has a slot somewhere throughout the week. Like, let's say it's 2 hours or 3 hours, they have a slot. So let's say I'm Minister of Finance. I have Monday morning 9 to 12, okay? So Monday morning comes up, live, I'm on TV. I'm saying, hello there. I've collected all of your questions over the course of the week. So he doesn't even have to do it personally. Someone can filter through the questions and select the good ones. I've seen your questions. I'd like to give you some answers to some of the reasons why we do what we do. Here we go. Slideshow behind him. Okay. Many of you asked, why did we put the tax up from 5% to 6%? Well, here on this graph, you can see that when we put the tax up that much, public expenditure can increase that much. I've spoken to the minister of this. This is the budget. So you will be able to see that extra 1% out of your tax or out of your income. You will see it by January 2022 on the roads, etc.
I wonder if you can add at that table the people's representative. He's the guy with the ear. He's the game ranger who hears the questions. Who can, as the debate is going on, he can ask the question. But guys, but what about? You forgot about the tourism sector on the west coast, or the fishing on the west coast, or whatever. Because then you feel like you're actually actively participating.
You're there, exactly. So that was the idea behind the panel government, and I've gone on this long tangent. But the reason why I think it's such a good idea, and it is deeply flawed, because it doesn't work at a municipal level. But as a whole, I think it's a good idea, and the reason is exactly what you're saying now about debate. Because now, when you've got the coronavirus, okay, so we all get a notification. We can most get those on our phones. We get them all the time from the government. Boop, text message. Emergency panel government meeting. Tonight, 6 p.m. It's going to go long. Like 6 p.m. till late.
You get on YouTube.
Tune in. It's on YouTube. It's on ABC One. It's on radio channel this. Tune in wherever you can. Okay? Listen, watch, contribute. So now, 6 p.m. rolls around.
And the journalists are watching.
Exactly.
All the bodies governing.
We can even have like a little grandstand around it for journalists. So now, 6 p.m. rolls around, panel government comes in. Good morning, I'm the rep for the panel government. Today we're going to be discussing specifically the coronavirus. We're going to be putting together a plan of action. We're going to develop this plan of action today. Tomorrow we're going to pitch that plan of action to the public. We're going to leave it for a week open to comment. Then next week we're going to give the final version. Okay, all very transparent. So then they come up, they say, right, hello, this is what's going on. We don't have any COVID cases right now, but overseas we can see that this is happening. Based on what's going on in countries similar to ours, this is what we predict will happen. this is etc. etc. They explain it to everyone exactly what the information they have. Okay, then they say the decisions we've made are as follows. Okay, or the decisions I've made as Minister of Finance. This is what I need. Then the Minister of Health says, okay, hold on. This is what I need. They debate. Okay, it's a panel. They're debating back and forth. Everyone's talking to everyone. Everyone's chipping in. Everyone's talking about what's important. The public's chipping in, like you said. Now they close it. They say, okay, cool. By tomorrow, we're going to put the final plan up somewhere. Everyone will be able to see it. Everyone follow the panel government Instagram page. We'll break it down. We'll summarize it. Go check it out. Next day, 9 a.m. pops up. Everyone gets to see it. That throughout the whole next 5 days or whatever, someone's combing through those comments as a job. They're getting paid. Comb through the comments, select the things that make good sense. And we don't pick like some moron. It'll be someone who understands economics will be going through these comments. Okay? They select good comments. They submit it to the panel. Then on Thursday again, 6 p.m. Okay. This was our OG plan. Here's your comments that we think are good comments. This is how we've changed it. Friday or the following Monday, they say, okay, cool. We as a country, we've made this plan. We're going to implement this plan. Let's hope it works. Okay, so then 6 months down the line, if the plan doesn't work, it's not their fault. Okay, everyone contributed.
Everybody was in on it.
We all were in on this plan. We all agree. Even if we didn't all agree, the smartest people did agree. Okay, so we all agree. There's no political bullshit. There's no. You see this a lot in Parliament. Videos of our Parliament get circulated all around the world. I see them on 9gag is a site primarily German. I see the Germans posting about our Parliament on the reg. But, in Parliament there's so much like...
Yeah, what I like about what you're saying is it removes two of the things about politics that I think are the most toxic and that causes the worst aspects of politics to flourish, which is lobbyists and lawyers. Because most of the decisions are probably, it's a minister and then his lawyers and then his advisors. And in America or other places, it's the lobbyists who are so cashed up to convince people about what needs to happen. So it's big business flexing political muscle. And this would be a transparent system would see right through that, where it's not about the politics of the matter, it's about the matter.
Exactly.
Because if you look at most of the court cases and everything, our politicians are embroiled in personal vendettas and like it's Malema versus the Vryheids van Plus or whatever. And it's just politicking, but it's not tackling the issues.
But it's like we said earlier, I think that if you were to have that game show, we've got the curtain, and they can't hear each other's voices, they don't know who it is. If you were to put the leader of the Vryheids van Plus and Malema across the table from one another,
you disguise the voice.
Exactly, you disguise the voice and you ask them both, why don't the two of you discuss public health? I think they'd agree on most of it.
Exactly.
They'd agree on like 95% of...
And we wouldn't know who's speaking necessarily. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, they wouldn't agree or they wouldn't disagree on things the way that they do. But I think a lot of politics nowadays is so much about showboating.
Totally.
Like, if you look at the US, it's such a hectic system. Only the top two, or only the Democrat and the Republican reps get to take part in the debates.
Yeah,
what kind of bullshit is that?
Yeah, exactly.
There's like so many other centralist people who aren't as crazy as this or as crazy as that, but we only give them any screen time at all.
Yeah.
And isn't that the stupidest thing you've ever heard of? How many people are we losing in the middle?
I don't think they technically classify as a democracy anymore.
No, bureaucracy or something.
Yeah, exactly. And also just the access to the political process. As I said, there's a cash barrier. But I mean, for that matter, I guess access to justice in our country, there's also a cash barrier. If you're rich, you'll get off. If you're not, you go in prison. It's sad because that's not justice.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There's a backlog and there's all different reasons. If you get a state lawyer to represent you, and he's overworked and he's not paid well, whatever. Yeah, it's not a good... society is not going to work if there's a cash barrier that prevents most people from accessing the things that are supposed to help them live a life.
I've been reading this book. It's a thick one there on top. It's called something like Inclusive and Sustainable Growth in Southern Africa or whatever. Yeah. I've been like working through this book, and it's got to do with a lot of things. But one of the things, the past 2 or 3 chapters I've been chatting about is cartels. Not like, not narcos, like cartels on cement and bread and things like that. So
Waste.
exactly. So what it was talking about is basically protocols and policies to try and control, restrict, and prosecute cartels. And it's talking about how effective they are and blah, blah, blah. But there's a big problem. One of the problems is that the laws are, in a lot of places, structured in such a way that if you are the instigator of a cartel, so let's say, I mean, for those people who don't know what an economic cartel is, that's when there are 3 big companies in the country that all sell cement. They agree with one another that none of them are going to undercut the other, and then slowly over time they all raise their prices.
And they keep competitors out.
Yeah, exactly. So now the price of cement is like 6 times what it should be, because that's just the market price at this stage. But the market isn't being allowed to regulate itself. It's being controlled by these people who are making sure no one sells cement for cheaper than the 3 big companies do. And you think to yourself, oh, why wouldn't a company want to sell their cement cheaper than others and get more business? It's because if you've got 3 big ones and they all raise their price to 3 times what it should be, their profit margins grow exponentially.
And then that becomes the price.
Exactly. So the problem is they've got, in a lot of these cases, maximum fines. Okay. So they're talking about Kenya in the one case study now. Kenyans or Ethiopian cement. Sorry, Ethiopia has a rule or law that says you cannot be prosecuted when it comes to cartels. The maximum fine that can be imposed on a company is a certain amount. It equates to about $80,000. Okay, the profit that they make off of being a cartel over the course of 3 years before it's detected is so much more than $80,000. It's so much that it would be silly for them not to be in a cartel.
But that's why most mega corporations that have any version of polluting Earth, they laugh at the fines.
Exactly.
Oh, there's an oil spill or our boats, or there's a carbon tax on our trucks. They laugh at it because the profit margin is so high. It's nothing. I think they actually put it into their budget. No, we're going to have like 5% of our budget goes to fucking all these fines.
Yeah.
And it's fine. And it's horrible. And I agree with you because, firstly, obviously, as you said, the market can't regulate itself. But then secondly, then the damage being wrought is not even wrought on Earth for the majority of people. It's to make certain people rich. Sometimes I would justify, okay, but this thing is going to be this economic boom for this community, so it's worth destroying, I don't know, this natural little reef to build a little industry for the people that live there. But it's not, they're not going to get anything from it.
Yes, I watched David Attenborough's documentary, the newest
I'm starting to watch that. Oh, it's going to make me cry.
Listen, man, you got to see it.
I'm a hippie, so it's
a must watch. I've seen all of them. I mean, all those sustainability documentaries, I've seen every single one. I don't think, as soon as they come out, I'm on them. But David Attenborough's newest one is called A Life on Our Planet, or Life on This Planet, or something like that. And it's his witness statement of his life.
Amazing.
And because when he started his career, the global percentage of wildlife that was still untouched was something like 75% or something. It's less than 50 now. It's gone down, a lot. So he's basically just talking about how things have changed over the course of time. And he, at the end, the last 10 minutes or so, it's like a 2-hour documentary. The last 10 minutes, he talks about what a future could look like if we get it right. And he shows the most incredible imagery. It's like enough to make you cry. Where he shows this big Great Plain in America filled with bison that are traveling, but then there's also these big wind turbines, and they integrate so well with the landscape. Like it's not like obstructing anything. It's just there. It works. It's not bothering the buffalo, but it's giving us.
As we said earlier about racism, man's struggle against nature is also not struggle. Man's struggle with nature has always been there. Man's overpowering of nature is also a new thing. For 250,000 years we've lived in that. We are nature. Sustainably. We are nature. We literally come from it. Then we got this idea, now we need to beat the shit out of nature. We need to overpower it.
We need to use it.
And exploit it, but it's a quite new concept. And I think It could also be unlearned. It's software. It's not hardware.
Yeah, and I mean, David says in the documentary, he says we keep talking about living sustainably, but we don't get it. We don't get the definition. Anything that you cannot keep doing forever is unsustainable by definition. So people talk about things like sustainable fisheries because we're not fishing from the it's like if you cannot fish that way forever, it's not sustainable. You need to change something so that you can fish that way for the rest of human history always. So now, I mean, they're talking about the UN has made some great strides toward big areas in the ocean that they're going to ban fishing, like massive areas.
Good luck keeping the Chinese.
So with big fines or whatever, but again, I mean, big fines. We hope they.
And how is the UN going to get China to pay fines? Because they just balk at the idea.
So I mean, it's this long story, and the documentary is just like it's incredible, and I would highly recommend anyone go see it. You should definitely see it. Let me know what you think about it when you've seen it.
It just made me think about a thing I saw yesterday. I loved it. Maybe you saw it as well, but a study came out that they did with children, and kids by 3 years old, most children prefer the fractal patterns that you see in nature, like on a leaf or on a plant or just the way things grow. There's the fractal. Yeah. They prefer looking at that than at any other man-made patterns that are, and especially they come from. We live in Euclidean patterns or Euclidean geometry, which is the way our modern squares and triangles, our modern, and then they from there they've started extrapolating that the calming effect that nature has on us is probably in an innate thing. It's in us.
But so, what did I say when you walked into my place for the first time? Yes. Remember we were talking about this big aquarium that's here next to us. People ask me, I've got this big 300-liter aquarium up here, and it's full of plants and then lots of tiny little fish. And people ask me, why don't you put big fish in? And I say, big fish destroy the plants. Yes. And you said to me when you came in, you said that the aquarium was so zen. Yeah. The zen's coming from the plants.
Exactly.
Like the zen's coming from that growth pattern. I've had aquariums with big fish. It's not the same.
No, yeah.
The zen's coming from the green and the plants.
Because it's almost more like a painting that subtly moves.
Yes.
Instead of a zoo. Which is what I like about it.
No, I like it too.
but as somebody who looks at nature a lot, it was so comforting to be reminded that it's actually an inherited trait, that we do have a connection. It's almost like nature is reminding us to zen out on it, just to remind us where we come from. So it's like it hypnotizes us. Look at the little fractal patterns and stuff.
No, I agree with you. And I think, I mean, you've obviously taken a walk now through my house and seen how many plants there are, and it's something that, my family really does try to incorporate as much as possible. But I mean, in this documentary, when they're showing this imagery, and it's like concept art, but it's in video form, you know, when you see this imagery at the end, when now, for example, there's this amazing thing. Have you been to Eastgate recently?
No, I've never been there.
You've never been to Eastgate? Don't you live like somewhat nearby? You live in...
London is in Randburg.
Yeah, this is not that far.
Is it not? I
drive to Pretoria and back every day.
For me, as a Cape Townian, this is like a whole other province. The East.
I see. Anyway, I mean, Eastgate has now installed these things in their
urinals or what?
No. No, in their food court. They've installed these massive structures, like statues, and basically it's like this interwoven. It looks like a basket that's been woven, and it just sort of goes up and out like a big flower pot. And they had these things in the documentary as well. And basically, what it was so brilliant. It's this big, exactly that structure. That's like this interwoven big flower pot, but it's as tall as a skyscraper, and it's got it's a tourist thing. So there's like stairs, and people can go. And along the whole thing, vertically, there's just vines and plants and just of every kind. It's this big, living, breathing, organism.
Carbon trap.
And it's so, exactly. It's so easy. Those things will grow themselves practically. Especially at that altitude, you've got a lot of humidity. They grow themselves, especially in some parts of the world. It's very easy. So all you need to do is set up these big things. It takes up the space of a building. Now it's this beautiful, I mean, it's gorgeous. It's
Yeah.
like this massive thing. It's interwoven with plants, and it just works. And this image that they show in the documentary, it just makes everything look so much nicer.
Yes.
Right? And it's exactly like what you were saying. Is people prefer that. We prefer to see natural scapes over anything else.
What I love in that realm is these organic bridges. So over roads where it's grass and plants going over roads, so animals can also cross without and humans without crossing on the tarmac.
On the road, yes.
Yeah.
They've got them, I can't remember which country it is. I think it might be an island where they've got these bridges that they've built for crabs. Because the crabs, they've got like millions of crabs that every year migrate from the beach. They come into the island or into the country or wherever. They lay their eggs there. They go, or they die, or they go back, or whatever. And then a few weeks or months later, just millions.
Yeah.
I mean, like you cannot even... You can't imagine how many crabs.
They
need to walk back to the sea, and it's like a couple of kilometers or whatever. So they've got roads there, and the problem is, I mean, if you're a crab, a road's a death trap. I mean, so they've built these bridges. So they've got things next to the roads that crabs can't cross, and then they've got these openings that are bridges that go over the roads, and the crabs' migration goes untouched. It's like
but animals will learn if there's a big bridge over the highway here, they would learn that that's where you cross to get to that place where I want to lay my egg or mate or whatever.
Exactly.
So it's it's supposed to be a delicate dance between us and nature instead of just this pummeling that we're trying to do at the moment, which I don't get because making sacks full of money. It's so much like the old pharaohs who got buried with their treasures. What is the fucking point?
Yeah.
What is the point of all this gold and cash and everything you have if you just die? What do you like? Even if you look at I'm always. You said earlier you're a fan of Elon Musk, and me and my brothers, we always joke. It's like, why is there only one Elon Musk that's trying to get us to space with all these billions? All the other guys are just trying to make more money. I mean, Bill Gates, you could say he's doing his own thing, but there's only one like Tony Stark motherfucker out there trying to let's shake it up.
Exactly. I was watching, there's a documentary called Explained on Netflix. I
love that show.
They have that episode about billionaires, and the documentary is like 20 minutes long. And this episode is called Billionaires, and it's talking about why there are so many billionaires. Because there's like a couple hundred, or maybe just over 1,000 billionaires right now. There we go. Maybe just over 1,000 billionaires right now, which is way more than there's ever been.
Yes.
And the richest guy to ever have lived in the history of the world was way richer than the people now. It was John D. Rockefeller.
Oh, yes.
I mean, adjusted for inflation, his net worth was like 350 trillion. It was, a billion. It was stupid. But anyway, so they talk in this documentary about the fact that back in the day, it was seen as shameful to die with your money.
Yes.
Which is why today we see so many old libraries and monuments. I mean, if you've ever looked at something, I went to the Washington Monument a couple of years ago, and the whole like reflecting pool and everything. The amount of cash that went into building these ridiculous monuments is, I mean, it's beyond anything we can compare.
But South African libraries are sponsored by Dale Carnegie's Institute.
So that's exactly the thing. So people back in the day, when they started getting 50, 60 and their lives were going to end, within the next 20 years, they started to spend exorbitant amount of money on improving the area around them because it was seen as shameful to die with your money.
Which I think it is.
Isn't that perfect?
Also,
because that confirms there's this whole idea about trickle-down economics.
Yes, so
trickle-down economics is this idea that billionaires, it's all okay because they'll spend all their money
and it trickles down to the lower.
That only works if they do spend all their money. So back in the day, trickle-down economics really did happen, and it happened perfectly. Today it doesn't happen because people hoard money. I mean,
and it's also been proven that to give your children, for them to just inherit your cash, is almost like a death sentence to them because they usually fuck up.
It's like people who win the lottery. People who win the lottery almost never do well.
No.
The amount of I saw this article about the amount of people who win the lottery and file for bankruptcy 3 or 4 years later. It's disproportionate. It's like 10 times higher amongst people who've won the lottery. And the reason why is because if you just get money, you never learn how to get money because you just received it. So you never learned how to earn it, and you also never learned how to manage it. So now it's like Jackie Chan, I think it was Jackie Chan, who said he was asked about inheritance, and he said he will never give his son any inheritance.
Yeah.
And he said the reason why, the quote goes, I'm going to butcher this now, but it's something like, if he can earn that money himself, he will, and if he can't, he'll just be wasting my money. Which I think is really, really
true. But you mentioned earlier hoarding, just hoarding cash. You have this book here, Sapiens, and Sapiens explains so well why humans have trouble with binging behavior. It's because back in the day when we were foragers and we walked past a fig tree, we would have to eat that whole fig tree because we might never cross a fig tree again in our whole life because we only lived to like 35. But so we have we've kind of hard-coded our DNA to be able to binge once in a while. But now we've set up society that we can binge all the time, and we completely get addicted to it. And I think it's the same with hoarding. Back in the day, you had to have some impulse for the winter to hoard into your cave, like get some meat in there, get some fruit in there, stash it away just for this winter. But now we've made it available for people that are really hoarders to hoard the fuck out of themselves. Eventually they die in their houses in their own poo because they can't stop hoarding. But hoarding as much money from the economy, to me that's the same as somebody isolating themselves in their house and just like with telephone books and whatever.
It's over preparation.
Completely.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like you said, we've evolved as a species to prepare in the good, in the times that are good. We prepare for the times that are bad. But I mean, someone like Jeff Bezos, like at $140 billion, no time will ever be that bad. Ever. So I mean, I think if you're a billionaire, if you reach $1 billion, you can probably be pretty happy that you're never gonna face it. You're never gonna face a problem you can't solve for the rest of your life.
I liked one of those memes that people said proposed a cap. You can make $1 billion and then you're a billionaire.
Yeah.
But you're not
when you get to 999, they give you a trophy.
Yes. Yeah. You're a billionaire.
You're a billionaire. You did it. You won. Congratulations. And then from there, all the money you earn goes straight into charity.
Distribute it.
Listen, we're coming up on the last 3 minutes or so. So tell me, I mean, we're going to completely pivot now. Tell the people who are listening, where can they find you? What are you working on right now?
So they can find me. At the moment, I'm writing things to be shot next year. Hopefully, the COVID restrictions will be less.
Can you tell us the name of the project?
Yes, the new one is called Lastest, which is like Lasts, the last ones probably. And it's just a small little movie about 4 matric kids on the night of their matric farewell and how they spend it and all kinds of things coming up between them. So I'm shooting that in Jan, and I'm very, very excited about that. And then we're working on a new season of Hotel, which I'm very amped about. I hope I'm allowed to say that. I just realized I don't know if it's a big deal. I think people can know. Other than that, I'm a bit of not a hermit, but I'm after the social dilemma, I kind of stepped back a bit. I was off Instagram for 2 years, and I got back on to promote this show of mine. And I've realized I guess I'm a bit out of touch as well, but I feel better when I'm not on there too much. Or what I actually realized is when I get on there, I'm completely addicted to it. Like, if I post something 5 minutes later, I want to see if people liked it. I'm like, but for 2 years I was okay without it. So they can't find me there really. They can find me there, but I'm not going to find a lot there. No, they'll see me around. I walk around. Just check out for the movie that I'm writing now. Will probably only be done in 10 years, but when it comes out, it's going to be called Tommy and die Tronkvoels, and you guys should watch it then.
Fantastic. I'll be the first in line.
Thanks, Jason. Awesome. This was a lekker chat, dude.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was very good.
I'm glad we just immediately got into the crazy stuff. Like,
but it's because we started talking beforehand already. We were chatting for like half an hour before we started. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for watching.
Yeah, peace.